Okay, hello YouTube. I thought I'd do something a little different this evening. I'm going to play a Bach cantata, and I will play it 4 times through, as if I am accompanying a congregation that is actually singing this cantata. I'm sorry, I should say not cantata, chorale. Uh, so when I accompany a congregation at the piano or at the organ on hymns, I play the hymns with continuous variation through all 4 verses or stanzas, or I think they're called stanzas. And my aim is to have my musical variations suit the text that the congregation is singing. I aim to portray the meaning of the text as best as I can through music as I play, that particular stanza or verse. And if you play hymns, if you look at the words of hymns, the different verses or stanzas, I can't remember. I don't know which word it is, verse, stanza, but whatever it is, if you look at the words through the stanzas, they vary in tone considerably. A hymn will frequently tell a story that moves from emotions of hope and joy into expressions of sorrow and even anguish, and then come back to affirmation at the end of the hymn. Frequently, hymns tell a fairly complex story. They're not just stating one thing, like they're not just stating one single absolute truth. They're frequently dealing with issues, challenges, problems that the hymn author is experiencing, crises of faith and of grief and of mortality and all of these other things that humans deal with. Like those are present in the hymns. Hymns aren't all just like sunshine and rainbows. Hymns have a lot of really intense pain, expressions of pain in them as well. So if as a musician, if you're sensitive to that fact, it really ought to change your playing of the hymns profoundly. Like you don't just play it the same way, through all 4 verses. You vary your like accompaniment or your presentation of the hymn at the keyboard to try to match the text. And there's an art to this, and this is something that church musicians can learn, in a somewhat formal way, I think. Of course, a lot of it is, a creative act, right? Like there's certain techniques that you can learn for how to portray certain things. So you can learn the musical techniques, yes. But ultimately, it is going to come down to the musician's, sort of inner creative instincts. And that's part of the art of being a good church musician, is having a knack or having an instinct or an intuition for how to do those things. So it's something I've worked on, and something I bring to my work as a church musician, in that kind of professional context. And also it's something that I think about as a creative artist. Like it's something I think about how it affects my own music, my own compositions. Um, the idea of telling a story in music, like what does that really mean? How does that really manifest in the music? Well, those are really important questions, I think, for a composer. And I kind of arrived at those questions, or I arrived at my exploration of those questions really through church music, through seeking to just do a good job of playing a hymn in a way that's appropriate for the hymn and for the congregation. It actually led me into much deeper questions about what does it really mean for music to tell a story? How does my music tell a story? What story is my music trying to tell at any given time? And so on. So like anything in the composition world, you can you can experiment and you can develop your technique through experimentation and through practice. And one way that you can do those experiments as a composer is give yourself what we could call exercises. I was thinking about what I said on my previous live stream, that all of composition really comes down to basic techniques applied in various ways. At the end of the day, music, it really is some combination of matters of pitch, matters of rhythm, matters of counterpoint, matters of harmony, matters of form. Like, it's the same basic issues, no matter what music it is that you're talking about. And the way to learn those issues, or how to deal with those issues, is by doing exercises. That's where learning the craft of composition comes in. So that's why we do part writing exercises. A traditional compositional education, it involves a great deal of counterpoint study for hopefully obvious reasons. And anyways, without going into the rabbit hole too much further about compositional technique in general, I'll say that my exploration of the idea of music as a storytelling medium, I have found this to be best exercised through music for worship, through church music, through hymns specifically. That taps into a sort of directness, I guess, that might be obscured in other ways of approaching this idea. Like, what I mean by that, for example, is, many composers are fascinated with how music helps tell a story through the medium of film, right? And if you want to be a film composer, of course, that's that's going to be your priority, is figuring that out. But composers in general, tend to find it fascinating, the relationship between music and a visual medium of film, right? And how those two, music is not primarily a visual medium, right? But it interacts with the visual media of film and TV and video games, in fascinating ways. And so composers like to explore the idea of telling a story, or helping to tell the story that the film is telling, through music, and how to do that effectively. And again, there are many techniques that composers have to master to be effective film composers, or TV composers, or video game composers. Specific musical techniques that one has to learn about harmony and orchestration and effects and stuff like that. But as anything, it comes down to one's kind of personal attitude, and really kind of one's sort of creative spark. There are natural born film composers. Many of the great film composers are just they were born to be film composers. You can't think of it any other way. I mean, name any great film composer you care to name. Danny Elfman, and I know he's done other projects besides film scoring, but his film scores are just unbelievably brilliant. It's they're such a perfect match. How did he? You can't really teach that, right? You watch any movie with a Danny Elfman score and think, how could a composer learn to score a movie this creatively and yet perfectly? Well, that's because that's Danny Elfman. That's his particular genius, right? Other composers have their own particular genius, and other film composers do things very differently. And yet they're genius in their own way. I mean, you can have a fun time imagining if instead of a John Williams score for some great movie, try to imagine that you've never heard the John Williams score for, take your pick, E.T., right? Or something. You've never heard the E.T. score in your life, and you're seeing E.T. with no music, and you're thinking, as a film executive, let's say you're a producer, you're thinking, who should score this movie? Let's say John Williams isn't a choice for some reason. So, you're like, how would this sound if it were scored by... Let's pretend the movie was made in 2020, so we could say Hans Zimmer, right? How would Hans Zimmer score E.T., right? Imagine if E.T. was made... Maybe they're making a remake. There you go. They're making a remake of E.T., and they're going to have Hans Zimmer do a fully original score. What does that sound like? It's a fun thought experiment, right? Well, as a composer seeking to master storytelling in that genre, you kind of have to do that thought experiment, well, with yourself, of course, right? Like, this is something I learned in my film scoring classes at UCLA. If you want to be a film composer, you have to score your favorite films that were already scored by your favorite composers. You have to try to do it yourself. You have to actually forget the soundtrack to Star Wars. Like, you have to watch Star Wars and pretend that you can't hear John Williams's astonishing themes. You've never heard them, and your job is to score this scene. And you're actually, as a composer, write a cue for that scene, right? Whatever, pick a wonderful scene from Star Wars. My favorite is when Yoda lifts the X-wing out of the swamp in Dagobah in Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back. Yoda lifts the X-wing out of the swamp. It's one of the great moments in film, and it's one of my favorite film score moments. If you haven't, I gotta pull it up on YouTube. No, I'm getting sidetracked. Just look up that scene if you don't know the scene I'm talking about. It's one of the most beautiful marriages of music and a visual medium that I've ever seen. It's so perfect. It's art, really. So if I tried to score that scene, it would be really hard for me because I would feel a lot of pressure, for greatness and for genius. And that can be a tough thing, when you put yourself under that kind of pressure. Imagine being Brahms trying to write his first symphony and everyone's already calling it Beethoven's 10th, right? Would you really like to be Brahms in that situation? I'd rather be the Brahms that people didn't really know about yet, getting to write my first symphony, kind of in privacy, as it were, and then, like, let's see if people like this. But no, you've got big shoes to fill, right? So, I was going to make a sports analogy, like replacing Michael Jordan on the Bulls, but I don't know sports well enough. Is that a good analogy? Viewers, put it in the chat. How does it work? So after Michael Jordan retired, I don't even know what team he was playing for at that time when he retired. I guess maybe it was the Bulls. I should know this. Sports people know this. And then, like, being the next guy to get signed to that team or whatever, like, how does that feel for an athlete? I don't know. Okay, so putting yourself under that kind of pressure, though, can also help you bloom, right? If you don't crumple under it, it can help you bloom tremendously, because then you can find yourself, you push yourself into kind of a new breakthrough just by putting yourself under such challenging conditions. So I use the film scoring example, and now we're going to go back to the whole purpose of this video, which for me is the sacred music version of musical storytelling. I have here a Bach chorale, and it's from this edition, which is a great edition. If you're used to the Riemenschneider edition that many students had, this is sort of an ubiquitous volume in university music programs. Indispensable. This is my second one because the first one I used it so much it literally fell apart. So this is my newer version because the older version was literally in tatters. I've gotten a lot of use out of these books. A lot. But that's another digression. Anyways, so if you've only ever had that edition and you're interested in the Bach chorales, you really need to get this edition. It is the Charles Sanford Terry, published by, I guess this is by Travis and Emery. Not a publisher I'm familiar with. I don't know how much they work in the sheet music world, but in any case, it has, first of all, extensive copious notes, which read like a Louis Borges short story. There's actually a lot of drama behind the publishing of the Bach chorales. There's some really heated language in these. You fooled me. You have fooled me over and over again with the prospect, which I now know to have been groundless, of seeing the collection I gave you in print. I now demand the return of the manuscript. If you do not restore it within a fortnight, or failing a reply from yourself, I shall regard it as an intimation to me to send for it. That was Kernberger in a letter to Breitkopf and Hertel, by the way. So, right, real drama with these chorales. Seriously, though, it's fascinating stuff. So, anyways, the important thing is that you need to see the words. And this is something he talks about in the preface, that some composers and editors took it upon themselves to correct some of Bach's questionable musical decisions and to, make the chorales more, whatever, polished or refined or something. And the corrections that they were making were deviations from Bach's music, and Bach had good reasons for doing the seemingly strange things that he did, and a lot of those good reasons, beyond the purely musical, have to do with the text. So this editor strongly encourages anyone who's interested in the Bach chorales to read the text and to understand the text setting that's happening in the chorales and how Bach is using, very creative, inventive musical resources to show the meaning of the words, right? Because these chorales were not meant to be seen. Were not meant to be seen like this. That's not the purpose of these chorales. They're meant to be sung, probably with some kind of accompaniment, maybe an orchestra, maybe just a keyboard or whatever. But that's getting into speculating on the historical performance practice of the Lutheran Church at Bach's time. That's a whole other can of worms. But in any case, these chorales were, without a doubt, meant to be sung as part of a worship service, and were meant to evoke the feeling, the meaning, the emotions of that chorale, right? That's part of its purpose in the worship service, is to help parishioners understand, through experience of music, then to understand the meaning of the words that they are saying. Remember, when you sing a hymn at church, you are declaiming the words of the hymn writer as your own. That's the purpose of singing the hymn. You're not just singing it as a performance for an audience, or maybe you are, but the audience is God. And this performance is not really a performance in the insincere giving a performance like in a play. This is, you are sincerely stating these things, like, to God. You are, in essence, praying verbally through music. Like, that is what it is to sing a hymn. You are praying in the form of song, in the form of melody and harmony with words. I mean, I think that's probably obvious, I guess, to anyone attending a church or who's interested in church music. Like, that's what you do when you sing a hymn. You are really saying those things, like, you really mean it. So, this is just a flat water bottle, by the way. Everyone thinks it's a flask. It's not a flask. It's just a water bottle that is flat, so you can fit it in your pocket and carry it around without having to carry it. You can just put it in your back pocket. It's very convenient. Look, I have my water bottle in my pocket right now. I'm not going to show you, but I have my water bottle in my pocket. I can walk around all day with this water bottle without having to hold it because it's flat. It's not a flask. The only thing that goes in this is water. People are so weird about that stuff. They see me start drinking from this and they're like, whoa, buddy. I'm like, whoa, buddy, yourself. It's water. What do you think? It's because it's flat. Anyways. Right. So, what I wanted to say about the words of this hymn were, as I played this hymn, just for study, I felt strongly attached to the meaning of the hymn. I felt that the words were that the words really could be my own. And, it's an uncanny sense that you have when you read scripture and you read the complainings, so to speak, the groanings, the expressions of pain of the writers of scripture, the psalmists, for example. and you feel so strongly like, that is what I feel. And I wish I could say it like that. Like, that's, to me, part of the great power of Scripture, is that, we can read the words of the psalmist as if they are our own. We feel that this is a sort of fundamental truth that we have been experiencing that up to this point we have not been able to express very clearly. And then we read it in a psalm and we go, oh my God, like that's exactly it. How did I not know to say these words, right? I think I'm going to go to one of my favorite examples. It's from the book of Job. And it's Job's lament, Job's first lament. After he's lost everything, and he's begun to grieve, privately, his friends come to sit with him, and they sit with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word. Whew. For they saw that his grief was very great. Imagine that. Imagine grieving so greatly that your friends come and sit with you on the ground for 7 days without saying anything. Can anyone imagine that in the modern world actually happening? Like, for real. Like, this is like not just a thought experiment. Imagine that you have a grief so great that someone comes and sits down on the ground with you without speaking, very possibly without eating, so fasting, so just sitting on the ground, literally doing nothing else, for 7 days. And Job speaks for the first time, and this is what Job says. May the day perish on which I was born, and the night in which it was said, a male child is conceived. May that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor the light shine upon it. May darkness and the shadow of death claim it. May a cloud settle on it. May the blackness of the day terrify it. As for that night, may darkness seize it. May it not rejoice among the days of the year. May it not come into the numbers of the months. Oh, may that night be barren. May no joyful shout come into it. May those curse it who curse the day, those who are ready to arouse Leviathan. May the stars of its morning be dark. May it look for light but have none, and not see the dawning of the day, because it did not shut up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hide sorrow from my eyes. And that's just the start. That's just the preamble. That is just him cursing the day. We have a lot more in chapter 3 in Job's Lament. I'm not going to read it all now because it is a lot. Holy. Whew. So, if you are experiencing a profound and horrific grief in your own life that you cannot really put into words, it is so dark, may I humbly suggest that you read the book of Job, chapter 3. That's what I did when I had something like this happening in my life. I won't say what it was, but when I needed it, Job's Lament was a very, very powerful litany for me. I won't say prayer. That's probably different. Because when we read these words of profound grief, we also ought to understand that there is more that has to come after it. That, like, we know the story of Job. We know that God actually speaks to Job, literally speaks to Job at the end of the book of Job. Not everyone who cries out to God in Scripture gets to hear God's voice directly. I don't know how many it is in all of Scripture, but it's certainly not everyone. So Job is one of the few, I would say few, or is one of those chosen to actually hear directly the voice of God speaking in Job out of the whirlwind, perhaps out of. I take whirlwind to mean hurricane. By the way, I think the language, at least in my versions that I'm used to, New King James, especially, I think the famous word is whirlwind. Let's see. Oh gosh, I forgot how long this book is. It's a lot longer than I remembered. 38 chapters, 39, 40. So to it. Wait, so where's the whirlwind? At this, listen, wind is. At this, my heart trembles. The Lord reveals, then okay. Yeah, so it just says, chapter 38, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. And then we hear from God. But there's only that one word, whirlwind. I'm probably getting overly fixated on this, but I like to think that the whirlwind is really like some kind of enormous storm that came into the area, into the land. Not just a whirlwind, like a little, like, dust cloud, but like whirlwind, I like to think is, like there was an enormous, like, hurricane, basically, type storm. And that the voice of God wasn't just like a voice like this, but, was perhaps heard sort of all around them, from the storm and the earth and everything. That's my imagination of the scene. And anyways, so what was my point about this digression? We can read Job's lament and feel a powerful catharsis for it, as long as we recognize that Job didn't have the final word, right? Like God did. So I think if you really want to pray, I've heard this called praying the Scripture, or I think of it as like praying with Scripture and through Scripture. Perhaps you should look carefully for your prayer, right? What prayer it is that you're making. I think, of course, most of the Psalms are pretty good, but I mean, there's a lot of language in the Psalms about destroying my enemies too. Like, there's a lot of language in the Psalms of, like, basically the psalmist saying, as part of the prayer, Lord, I earnestly supplicate you to totally destroy my enemies. So that's not exactly our prayer as Christians that we were taught by Jesus. That we should pray for our enemies and love our enemies, right? So I guess I just mean there's a bit of discernment involved with praying the Scripture, but it's something I believe in very much and that I practice. Well, this is a long roundabout to come back to hymns, because I believe that one of the great functions of hymns is that they serve fairly reliably as kind of theological instruction and sort of proper prayer. Now, I know that's probably another huge can of worms that varies a ton depending on the denominations, depending on their, relationship with their liturgy and all this other stuff. I know that's a huge can of worms, and I know it's a big simplification. But I think in general, the purpose, the ideal like function of a hymn is that the parishioner, the individual saying those words, can feel like earnestly sincere in expressing those words as a personal prayer to God. And I do see that most hymns function that way. Like, I'm not deep enough into theology to really be able to discern if a hymn is like theologically questionable about some particular issue, right? Like, I know that there are things like that, especially when it comes to very debated issues in theology. Like if you have a hymn addressing the nature of the Eucharist, right? Like, yeah, that could be pretty thorny, because that's a huge disagreement among like Christian denominations, right? So, like, obviously there's issues there, and I'm not trying to paint with too broad a brush. But just in my personal experience as a Christian, as a Christian musician, I find hymns to be reliable affirmations, statements of faith. Okay, so that brings us all the way back to this hymn. And really, the purpose, I didn't think I was going to talk so long. I thought I was just going to start playing, but this is how I am. I do talk a lot. Um, I was playing through this hymn, and I felt strongly attached to the words for my own personal life circumstance reasons. So I guess I thought I would share the words first, and then perhaps show the hymn tune itself, and then talk about what I'm going to do as I play. So first of all, here's the hymn. So I'm doing this out of order from what I said, but maybe I'll just play the hymn first so you can hear it. So I'll play without any embellishment. Here's the basic version of the hymn. I have to change my setup just for a second. Because I need the music up on the stand, which means I'm going to have to change the angle of the video. Hold on, folks. We're moving. Oh, and it's a good thing I did it too, because Logic decided to have a conniption. It's probably because I moved the computer and the wire got funky. Oh no, there goes the book. Right, the reason I'm doing all this is because I need the book up on the stand, otherwise I can't see the music clearly enough. So I need that. So now you're getting to see a different angle of my studio with this lovely painting that my sister got for me as a gift. I have another one over there, but I don't know if I want to... Oh, there, we can see it. There's another painting that was a gift from my sister. I mean to put a lot more paintings in this room. It's a goal of mine to invest in some nice art to fill the walls of my studio. In any case, oh, and you can see my bookcase and my horrible piles of books. Okay, so here we are. You'll see me playing. Oh, this gives a better view of my playing anyways. Hold on. This might just be a better angle in general for the future. Wow, this is probably way better than just seeing my face. Can I get a view of the keys? I shouldn't be experimenting this live. Oh, wait. Oh, that works nicely. And you don't have to see my face as much. That's quite a nice angle. Let's do that. Heck, I might even go half stick on the piano so you can see the piano better. There we go. Half stick on the piano. It's not a great view of the piano, by the way, because I have a wool string cover in it, so you don't get to see the nice strings. But there's the piano. Here's me. Let's get Logic working again. Good. I want to record this. Oh no. There we go. So Logic has got the piano. And I'm going back to the slideshow, and that should just about do it. All right, finally, I'm going to play this fantasy for you. Well, there it is. Perhaps I got it. Right, I should figure out how to check the live stream for comments. I would sure be remiss if someone has been commenting and I wasn't looking so as to respond to them. So I'm going to try this in real time. I'm going to get rid of my screen capture. No, that's not the one I want to get rid of. Hold on, get rid of that. So I can log into my Google account without everyone on the live stream seeing it. Because as I'm streaming from OBS, I'm actually not on my YouTube page. So now I can actually see the live stream panel and top chat. I don't see anything. Okay. Previous live streams, I've actually had a few comments live, which has been wonderful to see, but also horrifying because I realized I wasn't looking at the comments live, and so I couldn't be actually responding to the people, which I figure is, why people comment on live streams live. So, so I'm really going to be better about that and make sure I actually look at the chat at least once every time I live stream. And this time there is none. So that means I think it's safe for me to go to log off. I hope that all of my playing just came through just now. It looks like I lost some audio. Okay, no. It looked like I lost an audio channel. Oh, it's just because I hid my desktop. Oh, well, there, now you can see my Chrome anyway. Which, funny enough, I don't see the live stream live on my Chrome. I wonder if that's what it looks like to everyone else, too, that I'm frozen. Oh, well, I don't know how any of this tech stuff works. Figuring out as we go. So, that's probably all for tonight. Thank you for watching. If you watched this. And I guess